In this video, I want to talk about Game of the Year. A lot of talk has been going around after God of War's release about whether God of War or Elden Ring will win Game of the Year this year. A lot of opinions out there about what people think is the Game of the Year. In this video, I want to talk about why I think Elden Ring edges out God of War for Game of the Year. This is my own personal opinion. You are totally welcome to yours. But I kind of want to run you through my thought process on this, on why I think it wins. And I'm not going to go into figures or stats about how many review scores or voter scores each game got. I'm simply going to go into the mechanics and the way these games are made to explain why I think Elden Ring is the better game. So to start it off, let's talk a little bit about Elden Ring and what makes the formula of Elden Ring work. And the first thing I want to talk about with Elden Ring is itemization. The itemization of Elden Ring is the best in any action RPG or open world game I have ever played. It doesn't use a random loot system to populate loot. It doesn't use a rarity formula of common, uncommon, rare, epic, legendary that we've seen so many times and we're all tired of getting to see. It has a fixed loot system, and that's spread accordingly throughout the map, which is fantastic. But what it's done in this game compared to the Souls games is it's added Ashes of War, and it's added the summons, the Spirit Ashes, allowing you to have even more things to find between the spells, the weapons, armor, and talismans, and they're all cleverly placed all over the map. So it drives exploration forward. You want to explore because you never know what you're going to get in these little nooks and crannies of the world. There are obviously other reasons to explore, but in terms of the itemization, you're always finding things that you can use to make your character better, and it really drives you to explore the world of Elden Ring. So what this itemization system has done is it's allowed From Software to create a game that's basically free of guidance. It lets the player explore on their own because they're motivated to do it on their own. They don't need to give them points of interest to go like, hey, there's something over here, you should go check it out, because if you don't, you won't find anything. There's stuff everywhere, and you always get rewarded for finding stuff everywhere, and it really makes players just want to go do it on their own. They don't need any more motivation. I mean, there are story and lore related things that are great to see, and actual things in the landscape that are cool to look at, which a lot of RPGs have as well. But it's compounded with the itemization system. And if you look at something like Assassin's Creed Valhalla, for instance, they've taken so much loot out of Assassin's Creed with this latest installment that if they didn't have markers on the map, you'd wander around and you'd hardly find anything, because you hardly find anything even with markers on the map. And at some point you become demotivated and you would simply stop being interested in exploring. And because a lot of the things that you find in Elden Ring directly enhance your build or your combat experience, you want to go engage in combat more because you want to test out the stuff you got. You want to see how it does because you like the combat of the game and you want to see it even better. So you go try out these things in fights. And this leads me to my next point, which is that the combat in Elden Ring is the best in gaming. The basic systems are there from Dark Souls, but there's more options in combat with the Ashes of War being added. Now you can change the skills on different weapons, and the affinity system allow you to change the scaling of different weapons. It gives you so many different ways you can play the game, it's nearly endless. I have made about 100 builds for this game, and I guarantee you I can make at least 100 more if I try. There are just so many different ways to play, and you actually want to try different varieties of things to play because the combat is so good. And because you're engaged in combat so frequently in the game, you'll inevitably be led to facing bosses in the game, which are the best in the industry. The boss fights are challenging, they're rewarding. From Software is known for this. It absolutely has phenomenal boss fights, from the music to the ambience and lore to the setting of these fights to the moves that you have to memorize. All From Software games have really, really excelled at this, and Elden Ring is no exception. And there are so many of them in Elden Ring, it's absolutely insane. And, the really good thing about these boss fights as well is they are challenging. There is such a lack of challenge in so many games in the industry, or there's artificial difficulty with more health and more damage. From Software has always managed to find a way to make the fights difficult without using artificial difficulty, I'd say, in the vast majority of cases. So you get to face these really good bosses with, this itemization that you have and this build that you've put together and you've worked on, and you want to test it out against these bosses. So that is just absolutely fantastic the way that works out. And something that's really interesting about all this is that these concepts, one by one, if you just dissected them, sound extremely simple. A lot of games do some of these aspects really well. But when you set them in this huge world on a scale that, many open world games are, but then add multiplayer, cooperative, and PvP on top of it, you've truly created something that inspires other developers and studios to figure out what exactly they did and how they can incorporate that into their game. Because a lot of games have one or two of these elements, but they don't have all of them, and that's what really makes Elden Ring special, in my opinion. In contrast, you have God of War Ragnarok, which is excellently produced. It's really, really well polished. It's well planned. It's a bit familiar. It has tons of accessibility, allowing you to tailor the experience to your liking. However, no one is going to make a God of War-like game, and other developers are not going to try to emulate it. So why is that? I think the obvious answer here is because it doesn't deepen or expand the action-adventure genre in any way. Everything is predictable, particularly if you've played other action-adventure games with similar exploration elements like Horizon, Assassin's Creed, Ghost of Tsushima, or the previous God of War game. You know exactly what you're in for. Now, God of War Ragnarok isn't focused on exploration. It's an added bonus, and its true focus is on the story and narrative of the game. And where the story is more engaging and told in a much better manner than Elden Ring, in my opinion, it doesn't make up for the issues God of War has with combat, exploration, and itemization. Unlike Elden Ring, players are not rewarded the same way for exploring, and you often know the exact puzzles you will face as well as the loot you will gain in any given area. There are no surprises that make you feel good for finding them, and you never wonder if other players have found this really cool thing because it's not unique or original, whatever you found. To compound this, the combat largely follows the same formula of enemies popping out of every place you would expect, and you then have to burst through all your cooldowns to eliminate a numbers advantage, and then R1 or R2 everything to death before repeating, never really feeling like you're getting any stronger, with the best fights in the game saved for after you finish the game. Additionally, there is a loot system in God of War where you find material and craft and upgrade gear, but you almost never feel stronger for doing so, and it doesn't change the way you play the game, so you never feel inspired to go test it out in combat. The game most certainly doesn't need this system since it's not an action RPG, but since they have added it, it could be a lot better than it is. What's particularly interesting to me is that Ghost of Tsushima follows a similar formula, just with an open world, that doesn't focus as much on itemization, but the game managed to capture combat and an immersion in a way that made me really feel like a badass samurai. God of War Ragnarok did, just not all that often. There were some spectacular moments where you really felt like the God of War, but a lot of the time on harder difficulties, you feel as though you're just struggling to kill weak enemies, and it's not quite the same as doing it in style like in DMC5. In some ways, God of War Ragnarok reminds me of a Marvel movie. It's a movie that when you walk into the movie theater, you know exactly what you're going to expect. You're going to expect great visuals, a lot of special effects, phenomenal voice acting, recognizable characters and actors from other movies that are very famous, and you're probably going to walk out of the movie theater having had a great time, and so will everyone that went with you as well. And a couple years after that, there'll be another Marvel movie which will follow the same pattern, great special effects, good voice acting, good production value that you'll enjoy, and a couple years after that, there'll be another one because Marvel has the system down. They know how to make a movie that will sell, that people will go see, that's a good experience, and people will keep coming back, but they will never push for anything better than that. And they don't need to. They absolutely don't have to. But Marvel movies are never going to win Best Movie of the Year at the Oscars. They're never going to win that. It's just not a thing. You several years from now, you won't even remember the stories of the Marvel movies. They're not, that memorable. The experience you'll remember. You'll remember you had a good experience, but nothing will stand out at you as being amazing. And in some ways, I feel like Sony is doing a similar thing with their first-party titles, where they've figured out the formula, and they are just cranking out these titles that follow that formula, and they're always hitting about that 9 mark-ish in terms of review scores, but they're never trying to innovate or push past that point because they don't need to. Whether they win Game of the Year or don't win Game of the Year, it doesn't matter to them because their sales are always good, where I feel like From Software took a much bigger risk with Elden Ring and is continuing to innovate on the genre and their gameplay. In conclusion, what you think Game of the Year is largely depends on how much weight you put into the story, graphics, and superb voice acting of God of War Ragnarok. If those are the most important qualities for you in a game, then this will easily win Game of the Year award for you. If you, however, favor gameplay, exploration, customization, itemization, and combat like me, then Elden Ring is hands down the Game of the Year. Either way, they are both fantastic games, and you should definitely play them both if you can. So what are your guys' thoughts? Am I completely off here? I tried to stay away from sales numbers or what other people think and their review score aggregates and just go into what really made this game better for me than God of War Ragnarok. What do you guys think? Let us know in the comments below.